Hello and welcome to On the Ledge, episode 138. And this week we're keeping the Aspidistra flying. If you're a new listener, my name is Jane Perrone. I like houseplants and I'm not ashamed of it. How the devil are you? I hope you are continuing to thrive and survive during this weird scenario of lockdown that we remain in, or perhaps some of you are being eased out of lockdown right now. Well, all I can say is lucky you. But you know what? We've got our plants, we've got our leaves to look at, and that makes life okay. In this episode, I meet Philip Oostenbrink, the National Collection holder of 2 different species of Aspidistra, the Victorian favourite that we should all be growing. I answer a question about watering snake plants, and we meet listener Roos. Yes, another listener called Roos, a different one from before. Thank you to everyone who has signed up to be a houseplant buddy on the thread that you'll find on the Houseplant Fans of On the Ledge Facebook group. There are lots of people there who are looking for somebody to chat to about their plants. All you need to do to get involved is put a comment on that thread, or perhaps if you see someone else who shares interests or perhaps geographical location with you, then add a reply to their comment and you can team up and have a chat. It might be via Facebook Messenger, email, Zoom. It's really up to you. But it's not too late to join in. So if you're feeling a bit bored, lonely or fed up during lockdown, then this is a great way of livening up your life. If you are not on Facebook and want to get involved, don't worry, you still can. Just send a note to ontheledgepodcast@gmail.com, letting me and Kelly, my assistant, know roughly what you're into and where you're at, and we will add a comment on your behalf. And it'd be really great to make sure that everybody, or as many people as possible, are paired up with somebody else who wants to chat with them. So do go and have a look at that thread if you haven't done already, and don't be shy, because you know what? Plant people are lovely people. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, of course, so you can click through easily enough and find it. If, on the other hand, you'd like to tell the whole listenership of On the Ledge about who you are, then Meet the Listener is for you. You can drop a line to the same email, ontheledgepodcast@gmail.com, and Kelly will send you some instructions on how to take part. And that's exactly what Rose did. Let's hear from her now.
Hi, I'm Roos from the Netherlands. I was really raised with plants and animals, but I first really got into plants myself when I had a burnout a few years ago. And one of the things that really gave me some solace, some feeling of accomplishment and usefulness was taking care of my plant babies. Since then, I started making YouTube videos about plants and about the amazing plants in my area. I live right in the center of all the greenhouses here in Holland, which is really, really fun. And I listen to podcasts and have an Instagram. I'm full of planty learning. I love it. I still feel like I am a plant beginner, but I am learning so much from you, Jane. So thank you so much for all the cool episodes.
Question 1. There's a fire and all your plants are about to burn. Which one do you grab as you escape?
I guess I'd have to pick Casper, my Florida ghost. He's such an easy grower and he's beautiful, and all my other plants I love as well, but Casper has a special place in my heart. I won him in an Instagram giveaway right in the beginning of my plant aeroid adventure, and he's just beautiful with the white leaves and the pink petioles. I love him.
Question 2. What is your favourite episode of On the Ledge?
My favorite episode of On the Ledge is episode 61, even though I love a lot of the episode and I've learned a lot about them. But 61 is the one about grow lights with Leslie Hellick. I've listened to it several several times actually, and I've bought some little measurement tools from it, and I'm really understanding a lot better why certain plants are doing well in my house and why others were not doing well and now are finally improving because they're getting more light. So thanks so much to Leslie. I love her. I even bought her book after listening to that episode.
Question 3. Which Latin name do you say to impress people?
The Latin name that I like to say is actually Alocasia mycolitziana Friedeck, because here, at least in Holland, a lot of people are calling the green version Friedeck, when in fact the green version of that plant is the mycolitziana and the variegated version is the mycolitziana Friedeck. So I might be a little bit annoying to people with that, but I like to be correct in my use of Latin, so I like to use that one.
Question 4. Crassulation acid metabolism or guttation?
Crassulation acid metabolism. I had to Google that one actually before answering this question. I'm choosing guttation because I love aroids. I have basically only aroids in my house, and I found out that crassulation acid metabolism is more for succulents and cacti, which I'm not very good at taking care of. So definitely picking guttation.
Question 5. Would you rather spend £200 on a variegated monstera or £200 on 20 interesting cacti?
Even though this is not a popular opinion, I would pick the Monstera because I don't like cacti, I cannot keep them alive, and I'd prefer to have a really, really big, beautiful Monstera. I have several cuttings that are doing quite well, but not great, so it would be really cool to have a really big one. Especially now that they're becoming a little bit more affordable here in Holland, you would definitely be able to buy a huge one for this money, so...
I love the fact that the Florida ghost is called Casper. What an inspired choice of name. Thank you, Rose. Nice to meet you. And welcome to new Patreon subscribers, Jian Liang, Desiree, Sarah, and Kaylee, who all became legends this week. And thanks to Andy, who upped his pledge from crazy plant person to legend. Check the show notes at janeperrone.com for details of how to join the merry band of Patreon subscribers. And if that isn't your bag, then you can give a one-off donation via ko-fi.com or PayPal. Those links are also in the show notes. Leave me a review on your pod app of choice, or maybe just tell a friend about On the Ledge who's in need of some lockdown listening. I had a few interesting emails in response to midweek bonus number 5, the question about shopping at big box stores, which I wanted to share with you. One of the messages came from a listener who works at one of the plant farms that supplies the big box stores of America. And this person, who wants to remain anonymous for perfectly understandable reasons, said that the amount of plastics, chemicals and plants that are disposed of would make your stomach turn. Sometimes we throw out tons of perfect plants simply because the company changes its mind. And so their message is this: please use social media to create a socially distanced plant swap. Then you would have friends to swap with in person later. So thank you to that anonymous listener who got in touch. It's interesting to hear how much wastage there is in this industry of mass houseplant production, and it's something I'm hoping to come back to in a future sustainability episode. And another listener got in touch to say that some of the big box stores do have people who are in charge of the plants, but they're usually rushed off their feet and unable to keep up with the demand for care for these plants. I'm sure that's correct for some of them. I know that in the UK, places like Wilkinson's, which I guess, would you call that a big box store? I'm not sure, but it's a store that sells all kinds of things, including plants and gardening equipment. And I know that they're, well, certainly in my local branch and many other branches that I've heard reports from, there is nobody to look after the plants. So it really does vary. So do your research if you can. And as I said before, let's keep supporting our specialist growers because they are doing a wonderful job. Long-time listeners to the show will know that I am a big fan of the Aspidistra. So I was delighted when Philip Oostenbrink, who is the National Collection holder, for Aspidistra alacior and Aspidistra sichuanensis cultivars in the UK. He's also head gardener at Canterbury Cathedral, so he's a very busy man. I was lucky enough to be able to visit his place in Kent and check out his Aspidistra collection. Oh, and meet Marvel the cat, who makes a bit of an appearance in this episode. This was recorded before the lockdown back in early March, so we weren't breaking any rules, and of course for the moment Philip's National Collection remains closed to visitors, but hopefully sometime in the future he will again be able to provide tours of his collection on request and by arrangement. And I'll put a link in the show notes to the details for getting in touch with Philip. You can find Philip on Twitter as Philip with 1L HGCC. And I'll include all of the relevant links in the show notes if you're short of a pen. As always, this episode comes with a health warning, or rather a wallet warning, that I am totally not responsible for causing you to add to your plant wish list via listening to this show. I'm afraid it's one of the perils of On the Ledge. Right, are you ready to go down an Aspidistra rabbit hole? Let's go. Philip Oostenbrink, we're here in your front room with a array of Aspidistras around us. What could be better? I, as regular listeners to my show, will testify, I'm always going on about Aspidistras and how they're underrated and we should all be growing more of them. So I think you're on the same page with me on this. Tell me about your Aspidistra collection and how this all started.
Well, I've got the National Collection of Aspidistra alacior and also sichuanensis, but I've got a huge collection anyway, because I've got loads of other ones that aren't within my national collection. But it started with one plant I found in the deanery greenhouse in one of the cold frames, actually, because I always thought there was just a green one. But in the deanery where I work, they had a variegated one, which I thought was very unusual. And then I started looking into it a bit more and see what other kinds of Aspidistra there were, and I discovered that there are about 175 species alone. So that's why I started getting interested.
So your national collection, how many different, there's a term for it, isn't it? There's a plant heritage term. Is it each unit of...
The taxa.
A taxa, yeah. How many have you got?
Within my alacior collection, I've got 22. Sichuanensis, I've got 16, but outside the collection, I think I've got about 60 different Aspidistras.
Oh wow! Okay, so that's a fair number. Favourites are always. I can hear your cat in the back. Your cat's having. Marvel the cat is having a good munch on his breakfast at the moment, which is probably good because I'm allergic to cats. So but that's making me laugh. That sounds. It's all going on here. It's like naming a favourite child, but is there one that really is your favourite? I mean, I'm looking at this beautiful variegated form up here, which is kind of almost half. I mean, this is a very Instagram-worthy plant, isn't it? It's got half white, half green leaves. Tell me, is that a favourite, or am I just imposing my interest on you?
It is a very rare one. It's called Equinox, so it is half green, half white leaf. It's very difficult to get. But it's also very difficult to keep, so in that sense it's not really my favourite because it tends to revert, so it's not a very stable cultivar.
Oh, okay.
So these are just the two leaves, is how I got it from the nursery. I've got so many. There's one called Morning Frost, for instance, which is under the Equinox one, and it comes up green with a tiny yellow stripe, but as the leaf matures it sort of gets this mottled white and it becomes whiter and whiter. And I do like the ones that sort of change colour after a while, because some of the, especially the alacias, they come up in a certain colour, green maybe, and will then fade to white or stripy, all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple, and I've been a bit disappointed. I guess my expectations were for something like that looked like that. I mean, obviously they weren't that particular cultivar, but I was hoping for really dramatic variegation, and so far they haven't shown much variegation. I'm wondering if I'm not giving them enough light, or if, because I kind of have done the classic Aspidistra thing of sticking them in the darkest part of my house because they'll be okay there. Yeah. Is that a mistake?
Well, the variegated ones particularly could do with a bit more light to get that variegation in there. One that is sold as variegata quite often is very unstable, so you can get variegated leaves, but one year you might get one that is more green than white, other years you get loads of white in the leaves. So you won't always get the same kind of pattern. But yeah, giving them a bit more light helps. And what I find, especially with the variegated ones, is keep them outside during summer if you can, and they tend to really bulk up and get much bigger.
Here comes Marvel. Cats know that I'm allergic to them, I swear to God, they really do. And well, behind us, I'm just going to blow my nose because as ever I've got a cold. I swear it's not coronavirus, it's just a bog standard cold. We've got the cats are going outside. Are you going to go outside now, Marvel?
I think it might be better. Oh no.
He's like, no, I'm not going out there, I just want to make a noise. I want to be on a podcast, please. Behind you, you've got the wonderful variegated form which has got splashes of cream all over the leaves like a constellation. What's that one called? Is that a Sichuan one or is that an Elatum?
That is a Sichuanensis. That one, it's got spots all over the leaf and quite a lot of spots as well. It's one I got from America actually last August. I went there on an RHS and Plant Heritage Bursary and went to Plant Delights Nursery, which is like the Aspidistra Walhalla, really is amazing.
Plant Delights, where's that?
North Carolina.
Oh wow, okay. And they're big Aspidistra growers.
Aspidistra and loads of other things as well, but they have quite a huge collection of Aspidistra. And this was one that they had named Warp Drive.
Warp Drive, love it.
As a Star Trek fan, you have to have that one.
That one is on the list. I can see that completely. And how does it work bringing a plant back from the States? How tricky is that?
Well, it's not tricky if you've got the right paperwork.
Oh, so you just need the phytosanitary certificate?
Yes, yeah, of course you need that. Yeah. At the time, I could still bring them back in my suitcase with the phytosanitary declaration. They managed to do that within the week I was there, which was really good. But nowadays you can't anymore, so you have to have them properly sent and they have to go through customs to be checked and everything. But yeah, last year you were still allowed to bring them in your suitcase with a declaration, though, of course. So
you had to have it. You had to have Warp Drive. I mean, that's amazing. That's a great plant. And why is it that Aspidistras aren't more popular? Is it because they're slow growing and they just? I mean, when you do see them for sale, they're quite expensive still compared to, say, a spathiphyllum of a similar size. You're paying a lot more.
Yeah, well, they are slower growing, of course, and most houseplants really. I think that is one of the reasons that they are so slow growing. They're sort of testing microcrop a bit as well, so that might push the price down a bit. But we're looking into that. Actually, some of my plants have been sent out to be tested if they are stable on microcrop. So that will be.
So that when you say microcrop, can you just explain what you mean there?
It's tissue culture, so you get a few cells from the plant, and from those cells you make more plants, and you can get quite a few. Like thousands out of not many cells.
Right,
so,
right.
It's a quick way to do that, but the problem is that not all plants respond to it very well. So you can sometimes do microprop, but they might not be identical to the mother plant you had. So yeah, that might help. It's funny though, because if you read any houseplant book from sort of the 1800s to even the latest books, it just every single one says that they're coming back into fashion. They must always be around.
It's interesting, isn't it? I love looking at old photos of Victorian ladies with their Aspidistras. I think that's a brilliant thing to look back on, and you know, and I interviewed somebody on the podcast who had a plant which has been around for, he's documented to have been around for over 100 years. So, once you've got one, even if it's expensive, hopefully it will last for a really
it will last.
long time.
You can hardly kill them, really. It's overwatering is one of those things you need to be careful of. So, rather keep them a bit drier than too wet, because they will just rot away. Sometimes people get put off by the brown tips on the leaves, but you just need to mist them or keep them in a high humidity area, and they'll be all right then. But, that's one of the things. But
my Aspidistras so far, they've been fine, but they've kind of been in stasis. They haven't really been growing that much. So obviously they are slow growing, but what's the best way of getting them to put out new leaves? Is it just maybe giving them a bit more light than you might imagine?
Probably a bit more light. Also a light feed. I wouldn't overfeed them with anything. Just a light feed, like once a year maybe. They tend to start growing their leaves around January, February, so that's when they do it. But again, I'm preparing for Hampton Court flower show for next year with a display, and the plants I've kept outside in a polytunnel, like a little shade tunnel, they've just shot up and they've done so well. So it might just be, if you've got one and you think, it's struggling a bit, if you have a shady place outside, just leave it there for the summer and just leave it outside. Although you could leave it all year because they're very hardy, but that tends to give them a bit of a boost. They like that if they're outside.
A holiday, a holiday does us all good. What about the potting mix for these plants? Are they fussy, just regular houseplant compost, or should we be adding all kinds of extras?
They're not fussy at all, no. Personally, I use coconut coir, so the coconut core, which is peat-free, so they don't really need a peat compost at all. I give them a bit of sequestrin of iron or tomerite, something like that, just to give them a bit of feed, because, of course, the compost is only a medium, so you can add any feed to that you like, or even Miracle Grow if you want.
Yeah.
That's how I grow them. They're quite an airy compost. You don't want anything sort of sandy or anything too dense, because they just won't like that. They like air around their roots, because otherwise they'll just rot.
Right, okay. Well, that is all top tips, and I'm hoping I'll be able to get mine a bit growing a little bit better. Are there any cultivars that you still haven't got in your collection that you're seeking after in all strange corners of the globe? Are there any other ones? I mean, that white and green one is pretty outstanding. Is there anything else that's out there still to be got?
The white and green one was actually one that I was looking for and have managed to get. Generally, not really. No, I think I've got most of the ones documented. What I would like to do, though, is if I can get to Japan and see what kind of old cultivars they have, if there's anything around there. There's one called Amanogawa, apparently. The original Amanogawa only has spots. There is one being sold at the moment which has got stripes and spots. It's called Amanogawa, but it turns out that there is another one which is different. So I'd really love to go to Japan and see what kind of old cultivars they have there, and also compare, so see these English cultivar names, are they actually the original cultivar names, or is it just something that's been put on for the trade?
Well, as is so often the case. And we think of these plants as foliage plants, but they do flower.
They do, yes.
Tell me a bit about the flowers, because they're slightly strange.
They're very otherworldly, It's like an avatar thing. They're at the base of the plant, and there's sort of this star-shaped, sort of purplish. The Elati have got a bit of yellow in there as well, but some of the other species, like Citrunensis, are much darker, so they've got these dark purple flowers. But the flower actually determines the species, so if you just have two Aspidistras just with leaves, you can't generally tell which species it is.
Right.
But you need the flower to determine the species. So what does a stigma look like? There is this myth which you can't get rid of, that they are pollinated by slugs, but it's just simply not true.
Yeah, I remember my friend Robbie Blackwell-Miles talking about this, I'm in my mind, I'm remembering that he was talking about fungus gnats or small flies being the pollinators.
The flower evolved to look like a mushroom, basically.
Right.
And the fungus nets pollinate them. And if you open up a flower, because for identification you sometimes have to cut a flower in half, then you can really tell that slugs would never pollinate them, because they'd have to eat through the stigma to get to the pollen. Right. So they couldn't do that.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, how interesting. I mean, I guess probably you won't be growing them just for the quality of the flowers, but they're kind of a curious extra. And do they flower every year? How often can you expect to get
they can flower every year, but they tend to flower on plants that have been recently split or have got space in the pot.
Right.
Because I quite often hear people say, I've got this Aspidistra which has been in my family for a million years or whatever it is. And it has never flowered, and it is quite often because they're so pot bound, and I think that is one of the reasons they don't flower then. So quite often when I buy plants, of course they have quite often recently been potted up or something, and they flower. And especially the Elatia flowers can be quite big. They can sort of be the diameter of a 10p coin. So.
Oh wow, that's quite a lot. Yeah, that's quite big. I always think of them as being really tiny. And so, do you ever sort of go to an elderly? Or I'm always looking at through people's windows as you're walking around. Do you ever kind of like spot something through a window and go, "Oh my gosh, that's a really..." suddenly see an Aspidistra in some unexpected setting. I find often like National Trust properties will have like a massive Aspidistra. I find myself being a bit of an Aspidistra spotter. I'm sure that's the same for you.
Yeah, it is, and especially the variegated ones, because to have a big variegated Aspidistra, that's quite nice as well. And you don't often see them that size. You quite often see the normal green one of a decent size. But the variegated ones, they take a bit longer, of course, as well. And people have to look after them for years for them to bulk up like that.
Yeah. No, that is. Yes, I'm always looking out for interesting things, and I've got a sort of a photo archive of weird plants in stately homes that I want to that I want to get my hands on.
It's funny as well because, of course, with the National Collection of Aspidistra, you also have a National Collection of Victorians posing with Aspidistras.
So I've got all those photographs. Got photos.
But people send me photographs like. A lady from Plant Heritage sent me a picture from Venice where she was standing next to an Aspidistra.
Brilliant.
You get that as well, so it's quite nice. People do have this affinity with Aspidistra quite often. My grandmother used to have them, and it's just been one of those plants that quite a lot of people have seen before, and that's what I enjoy about it as well. It's apart from the plants being beautiful, it's also the history about them and how the Victorians love to grow them, and that also attracts me in these plants.
Do you have people coming to visit the National Collection? Can somebody make an appointment with you to come and look at Aspidistras? Is that how it works?
It is. With Plant Heritage and National Collections, you don't have to open up for the public, but quite often you want to show your plants as well. One thing I'm doing that with is when I open my garden for the National Garden Scheme, I have my Aspidistra collection on display in the living room. But if people want to come and see my National Collection, then they can find my name on the Plant Heritage website and the address and details, and can just give me a ring. And
Great. Well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Shall we go and have a look at some greenhouse plants? Is that okay? Should we wander? I'm just going to pick up this recorder and let's have a look. What do your neighbours think? They're probably like, this man has a lot of plants.
This is all lawn originally.
Oh yeah, you've enhanced.
Yeah. Well, the front garden as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can always tell a plant person because their front garden's full of plants
normally
as well.
This is all jungly and dense, and of course, for winter a lot of it is in the garage.
Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. What's this? I don't recognise that at all.
It's a pseudopanax.
Okay. It's got I love that
like
variegation.
That one. The brown one.
Yeah.
It's related to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
A friend of mine in the village has a National Collection of those. If you want to step.
Yeah, I'm going to go into the. It's a small space, but you've got a lot of Aspidistras in here.
Yeah.
Just going to sniff that greenhouse smell. Lovely. Love a greenhouse smell. So we've got loads more here. And
they're mainly in here because I had a bit of a spider mite problem.
Okay.
And to do something against spider mite, you up the humidity, and I've put some predators on it as well. That's why they're in here. Humidity in the greenhouse is quite high, especially with all the rain we've had. But there's some really nice old cultivars in here, and some of the ones that I brought back from America as well in there, so some of the Situanenses mainly.
And this is a nice, lots of variegation on this one.
So that is what I mentioned before, that is the what is sold as Amanogawa. So it's got stripes and spots, and Amanogawa is the Japanese name for Milky Way, and quite often if you see a spotted Aspidistra for sale, it's quite often labelled as Milky Way. But that's not really the correct name anymore. They've named that Ginger now. But the original Milky Way is this one here, so it's got the stripes and the spots and quite a lot of variegation on there. I'm really trying to bulk that up a bit, but it's very slow growing, of course, because of all the white in it.
I was going to say, there's not actually that much green there, is there? By the time you've got those splashes of cream and then the cream stripes, that's not a lot of chlorophyll in there, is it? At all.
Needs to shoot out a bit more green, really.
And do you ever have any Aspidistras in the ground, like over? If you have the plain green Elatior, could that be in the ground in a sheltered spot?
Any of the Elatior or Situanenses, and quite a lot of the other ones can just go in the ground. They're very hardy. Elatior and Situanensis species are hardy to about minus 15, minus 20.
Right.
But I've got another one called One Fat Lady.
I saw that at Chelsea on the display.
And that's hardy to minus 25, so very hardy.
Wow.
The only thing is they don't like it wet, so I tend to grow them maybe as ground cover under a pot, in a pot, and just try to keep them like that because they're better drained then, so they don't rot away. But they're doing really well. You can just leave them outside, no problem at all. Gets rid of the bugs.
Well, that's right. And I suppose spider mite probably is the major pest of these.
It is, spider mite is.
Do you have any secret top tips other than increasing humidity?
Well, what I do, I spray with SB Invigorator.
The wonderful.
That's really good stuff because I don't want to to put any chemicals on it, really. So it's all organic, or biological control through these little sachets that are hanging on the.
I wanted to ask you about these sachets. So this is a biological control. Is it a mite? Is it another mite that?
Yeah, it is another predator mite that eats the spider mites, and this is one that you can put in lower temperatures as well. It's,
right.
It does. Should do the trick. At least it'll knock it down a bit, and hopefully, eventually, I'll get over it.
And how does that work in terms of? Could you use that in the house as well as outside? I'm just wondering about them kind of wandering off and not being in the right place.
No, they will stick to the plant, really, where the food is, of course. So they won't go off and go somewhere where there are no spider mites. This particular one is one that also lives off pollen. So if you haven't got spider mite, then at least they can survive on pollen as well for a while. Okay. But it's a good one, and you can use them indoors. It's not like you have loads of bugs, then suddenly they're tiny. They're about the size of a normal spider mite even. So it's not worse than having spider mite in your home, really, is it?
But so those mites, once they've done the job and the spider mite's gone, presumably they will then die off because there isn't anything for them to eat?
Yeah, unless you've got something with pollen, so something in flower, then they will continue. But if you have another infestation, you probably have to repeat the treatment.
Yeah. Oh, it's great to be able to use these sort of non-chemical methods to control things. It's definitely worth looking into. And are people do you find that other people are getting really into these rare and unusual aspidistras and kind of trying to swap things with you? And I mean, is there a market for these very rare ones in the way that there's a market for the variegated monstera and all that?
No, definitely. There's. I'm actually running an Aspidistra European group on Facebook. Mainly set it up to be European because then you can swap around with everyone as well. But there are some very popular ones. There's one which is in a trade as chromatographic, which is actually called Kimboshi. I've got one indoors, but it's got spots, but it's got this aura around the spot as well. And they sell 9-centimeter pots for £40 to £50 because they're so sought after those.
Yeah, and I guess again it's the propagation. How is it just division on these ones? Is that the only way you're going to be? Yeah,
it's just division, and it's quite easy. You just take it out of the pot. You can clearly see the rhizomes, and if you find a bit that's got a bit of root on it as well, snap that off and just pop that up. It's very easy, and I've done it any time of year. I even do it in the middle of summer if I need to.
Yeah, but I guess it's the more you do that, the smaller your original plant. It's not going to be a massively. You're not going to end up with loads. No. Can you? What's the seed situation though? I mean, can you ever get aspidistra? I've never seen aspidistra seed.
They tend to only produce seed when they're out in the ground.
Right.
And when I was in the US, they did have some seedlings there as well. But in this country, it just won't happen. No, they just won't set seed.
I asked because we're just doing our annual sow along on the podcast where we're discussing growing houseplants from seed. So I'm thinking about everything in terms of, can you grow that from seed? And it's just interesting what plants can and can't, you can get the seed or you can't get the seed. So that's just an interesting one.
I've never seen aspidistra seed for sale.
Oh, okay, that's fair enough.
Very unusual.
Well, I guess that's why, again, another reason why it's, if you could buy a seed, then you'd be producing loads of plants and the price might be a bit cheaper.
Yeah, they're not stable from seed either though, so you will get different ones quite often.
Right.
Which could be good in a way, but on the other hand, how many do we need that have just got this tiny little different stripe?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I'm also being drawn to this one here, which is, you can tell I'm mad on variegation. This is a rather beautiful variegation with the sort of different levels of minty green stripes and cream. What's that one called?
That one is called Mangatsu, and that is one of the very old Japanese original cultivars.
Oh, wow.
And it comes up, this is one of those that changes colour. So it comes up with these quite green leaves, and then eventually the white will fade, and they can fade to almost completely white. The green will fade, and it will fade to almost completely white. And it's got some spots as well. But that's a very old Japanese cultivar, and those are the ones that I'm really looking for. So to get original Japanese selections, because that's where they grew them so much, and that's where they did all those selections.
And are the Japanese still Aspidistra crazy? They're still into them?
Well, one lady I spoke to who is Japanese said it's called this toilet plant because they have a lot of outdoor toilets in the older buildings, and apparently it was always next to the toilet.
Right, okay.
Shady spot,
I like that.
suppose.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But some people are still enthusiastic, and there are still good collectors there.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's really nice to see your national collection, and long may the Aspidistra reign. And it's not going anywhere, is it? It's going to be around for forever. So
coming back into fashion.
Yeah, it's coming as it has been for the last however many years. Thanks so much to Philip for showing off his awesome collection of Aspidistras. And now it's time for Question of the Week, which comes from Cape Cod Quaza Quaza on Instagram. Great Instagram handle there. And Cape Cod, as I'll call them for short, is a total noob to houseplants. And they've got a Sansevieria zeylanica in a 6-inch wide by 4-inch deep pot. And Cape Cod writes, I know they only need water about bi-weekly, if even that, but I don't know how much they need at a time. Help. What a great question, because I think this is one of the misconceptions about watering, that you can look at a plant and say, okay, I'm going to give it a mug full of water every week on the same day at the same time, and that way it will stay nice and hydrated. But what it's easier to forget when you're a beginner is that the amount of water that a plant needs will change according to the conditions, what the plant's up to, and of course what potting mix you've put it into. So this Sansevieria zeylanica, which is the plain green mottled form of the snake plant, the genus has actually changed to Dracaena zeylanica, but I'm not sure I can quite cope with that yet. It's a lovely plant. It does need regular watering during the growing season, as Cape Cod has pointed out. But how do you know how much to give it? Well, the one way to make sure that you're never over-watering a plant, and this method also means that it doesn't really matter how much you water, is to take the plant out of its pot if it's in an outer cache pot, so it's just in its pot with the drainage holes, and either put it in the sink and run a load of water through that pot until it's well drained and all of the compost has had a chance to get moist, or place it in a container of water to soak up as much water as it can in about an hour and then allow it to drain. By doing either of these methods, you're letting the plant choose how much water it needs rather than dictating, oh yes, it needs a mug, because inevitably you'll get that slightly wrong, and if you don't remove any excess water from the bottom of the pot, then root rot ahoy, as you might say. So I would recommend taking this plant out of its environment and sticking it in the sink and doing the watering once a week that way. It's much better to water thoroughly and so that the compost is allowed to get wet and then to dry out than dribbling on a bit of water every now and again. Part of the reason for that is if you do that, then the plant starts to think that water is only available near the surface and will grow a lot of roots near the surface, which is not what you want. You want a nice root ball much lower down in the pot. And if you're not sure if your plant needs watering in the first place, go ahead and stick your finger right in there, right up to the end of your finger, depending on the size of the pot, and see what the potting mix is doing around the root ball. If it's completely dry, then yes, it'll need water. If it's still pretty damp at that level, as opposed to being dry at the surface but still moist right in the root ball, then watering is required. And remember, with Sansevieria in the winter, this plant can be much, much drier, and you might only be watering this once a month or so. So watering practices are really vital to get right with plants like these, but it also makes a difference on the potting mix. So if you've bought one of these from the shop, a snake plant that you just recently bought, it's probably planted in something which is much more absorbent than I'd recommend. So if you have got a freshly bought snake plant, just be really cautious on the watering and make sure that the plant is allowed to dry out thoroughly before you water again. Then a good soak, then dry. That's the kind of seesaw that these plants prefer. And once you get it potted up into something a little bit more free draining, then you can be a bit more generous with the water because you've sorted out the drainage issue. So I hope that makes sense, Cape Cod. And if you've got a question for On The Ledge, drop me a line on theledgepodcast@gmail.com. That's all for this week's show. If you're a Patreon subscriber, there'll be an extra leaf with Philip going up in the next few days. Until next Friday then, keep the Aspidistra flying. Bye! The music you heard in this episode was Roll Jordan Roll by the Joy Drops, An Instrument the Boy Called Happy Day Gakana by Samuel Corwin, and the tracks Chiefs and Endeavour, both by Jazar. All tracks are licensed under Creative Commons. See the show notes at janeperrone.com for details.